35. When the noise and light had reached almost unbearable levels, there was a lurch, and it was as if they'd been thrown through the air. Unlike with the teleportation circles they'd experienced before, where there was no transition, this time there definitely was. All around them, beyond the sparking purple rings, was a rushing maelstrom of chaos and color. There was no rhyme or reason to anything they saw, only the sickening feeling of falling and turning, and the light around them curling so much that Medea could see the back of her own head, so lifelike she felt like she could almost touch it. Like the snap of a finger, they were in a grassy field. There was no great noise or light. The disorientation sent them all to the ground, gasping. Her head was swirling, her vision blurred, and the first few times she tried to stand back up, Medea floundered and fell back on all fours. Eventually, the symptoms got better and her body felt like her own again. Felt normal. Almost. Something was still off. The colors she could see were so strange.
Okay, I may have overestimated my ability to time travel. That was scary. And why does everything look weird?
Lily asked.
Are my eyes busted?
Medea blinked over and over, trying to clear away the strange effect. It was like she could see color, but underneath it and over top of it was the same scene, only shifted just a tiny, tiny amount. Almost imperceptibly, but more noticeable when she stared at one thing too closely.
Not unless mine are too. Which is possible. Chedsney, Mouth.
Mouth nodded. Beside her, Chedsney was holding his head and wincing.
Yeah. This is going to take a minute to get used to. Any idea where we are?
They seemed to be on a grassy field surrounded by beach and ocean. To the east, the land seemed to continue. A little ways to the northwest looked like a shack, or home of some kind. She dug out the map. It activated and showed her the landside hemisphere of Lennis once again. There were very subtle differences to the map she remembered. Some shorelines were a little different. Some dots were shifted slightly from where she remembered them.
Look at this. Look at how many more settlements there used to be,
she said with reverence. They all crowded around. All over the world were little dots, in Nasquat and Sasquat.
This is incredible. So, this is before the surface was destroyed,
Mouth said, stroking his chin.
The loss of life must have been unimaginable if there were this many towns and cities.
Chedsney shook his head. She could see the war in him already.
We have to warn them, don't we? Can we? What if we do? Won't that change the past? I don't know. But what else are we supposed to do? Just find them and say, hey, tell us how to destroy Dalgrin. Sorry, I can't tell you why.
She had been prepared to go back and find out the truth, but the idea of preventing it had never entered her mind. Pias hadn't even mentioned it as a possibility, and that gave her pause.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We still need to find the Great Ones. It looks like we're a ways north of where Lagan was. Let's go to that house over there and see if anyone's home.
She put the map back in her bag. With nothing else for it, and feeling very out of place, they all started towards the house near the beach. It was a simple home, made of wood, but well built. The exterior was painted white, with a pink wave pattern at the base. Chedsney knocked.
Excuse us. Can we ask for directions? We're looking for Sophie, Cormu, and Gabnid.
There was the thumping of footsteps. The door opened, and an automaton appeared.
I'm sorry, but the Great Ones are not.
It began to say in its odd mechanical voice, but stopped short when it got a look at them. Fam.
You are Regan. That is not possible. Surprise.
Medea added weakly.
Are they here? We really need to find them, please.
It bobbed up and down incredibly quickly.
Of course. I am so sorry. What are your names, so that I may announce you, Great Ones? I'm Medea, and this is Chedsney. These two behind me. Great Medea and Great Chedsney. Yes, I will announce you. Follow me.
He chirped, and then beckoned them inside. Lily had a sour look on her face.
I'm here too, you know. Were all these guys this rude?
Mouth nodded.
Yes, a bit. I don't know if it's bigotry or just that they can only take orders from Regans, though. I've met a few who are pretty nice.
She made a non-committal noise, and they all followed. The inside of the home was simple, clean. White painted walls, and beautifully carved wooden tables and chairs. There were little touches of life everywhere. A vase of plants on the table. Images of people in little frames on the walls. A painting of some strange alien landscape. And there, near the far wall, was a woman sitting in a small chair by a bed. The bed had a man in it. Medea gasped, covered her mouth involuntarily, and stopped short as soon as she saw. Felt sudden shame for wearing the clothes that she wore, for the sword at her hip, the crown on her head. Sophie. The woman was tall, beautiful, regal, mature. Her dark purple hair was not long. Instead, it was straight cut at jaw length, and upon her head was the crown. Her clothes were at once beautiful and mournful. Robes that clung to her and draped off of her like she was a goddess of silks. Subdued, somber patterns and colors. Her eyes strayed to the man in the bed. He was handsome, with a chiseled face, and blond, with short scruffy hair that was plastered to his forehead. Cormu. There was no one else it could be. Gabnid was far, far too large to be the man in the bed. But there was no one else here. The atmosphere in the room was very private and intimate. Sadness clung to her like waves lapping at her legs on the shore. It was inescapable in this place.
My lord, my lady,
the robot announced, bobbing very low.
I bring you great Chesney and great Medea, and 2 Lanusians.
At the mention of their names, Sophie's face turned in shock. She looked them over, her face shifting with every new detail she took in.
Who are you? Children. Wait. How did you get Cormu's spear? How do you have that dress? My sword.
She stood.
My crown?
She took it from her own head and looked at it.
That is not possible. Explain yourselves.
Chesney took in a deep breath and stepped forward.
We have a lot to talk about, and we need your help. That's going to be a bit of a problem,
Cormu said, grinning a little, and straining to speak.
You look good in my stuff, by the way, kid.
Sophie turned to Cormu and whispered,
Hush now, save your strength. Let me do the talking.
She turned back to them.
Yes, please, we should talk. I can already tell this is going to be a doozy of a story. Sem 222, go and get the extra chairs, and some tea. Right away, my lady,
it said, then rushed off. Seconds later, more chairs were brought forth, and they were all seated next to Sophie, flanking Cormu's bed. Tea arrived only moments later, somehow, but it seemed strange to even try drinking it. Chesney seemed especially distracted by seeing Cormu in that bed.
What happened?
He asked softly. A little bit of the scared little boy in him peeked through. Sophie took a long, deep breath and tried to hide the shiver in it.
Gabnid. Cormu went to confront him about his little project, and I found him in the underground, just like this, unable to move. He's almost completely paralyzed. Whatever Gabnid did, I can't find a way to cure it. None of the Medidroids can.
She covered her mouth, and wetness glittered at her eyes.
But before that, can you please explain who you are, and how you have come to be here?
Medea and Chesney shared a look. Where did they even begin? They nodded to each other in understanding. They would take it in turns. Chesney started.
Well, this is going to sound a little hard to believe. I don't even know if I really believe it. But we come from 10,000 years in the future. A few months ago, in my time, I found my way into the Tower of Gabnid, and accidentally activated a machine called Dalgren. A terrible creature was born, and it has begun tearing our world apart.
Medea continued.
We journeyed all over to find a way to destroy the creature and the ancient machine, and found Cormu's sword, armor, and helmet, but they were destroyed before we could use them.
Sophie looked confused.
It still stands after all that time? Could our scientists not disable it, or fashion a new weapon for you? And why did they send children? Well, no.
Chesney said uneasily.
There are no Ragan scientists. All that's left is ruins. All these things? We found them in the ruins of the world.
Her face turned horrified.
Ruins? But ruins of what? How?
Medea looked over to Chesney, sharing in the discomfort of having to tell the woman they'd looked up to their whole lives that something terrible was about to happen.
We're not completely sure, to be honest. That's part of why we are here. 10,000 years ago, a great disaster devastated the surface of Lennis. I can't say for certain what caused the destruction. A dragon appeared and laid waste to the world, but before it completely destroyed everything, Cormu destroyed it. But after that, the Great Ones disappeared. Nobody knows what happened. And then life on Lennis slowly put itself back together. Now, a new monster has appeared, but we have no idea how to stop it, or Dahlgren now. In our time, there are no Regans, well, except we just found Piaz and his team. All that remains is a few cities in both Nasquat and Sesquat, peopled by Lanusians. Piaz sent us back in time to find out what we could about what happened, and to find a way to destroy Dahlgren once and for all.
Cormu growled weakly from his bed.
This timing can't be a coincidence. It sounds like after Dahlgren is completed, something happens, and the whole world gets destroyed. Gabnid, you idiot! He really lost it. What has come over him? What is he making?
He tried to get up, but all he could do was tremble. He cursed.
We have to try again, Sophie. We need to get through to him. Can you tell us about Dahlgren? Why was it built? What was it for? What happened between you three?
Chesney asked, trying to sound gentle. Sophie shared a sad look with Cormu, took off her crown and felt at the inscription there. Medea's head itched, and she strained not to mirror the gesture.
This is all my fault.
Her voice sounded so bruised. Cormu protested, but she put up a hand.
No. No, let me speak it. Let me acknowledge it. Finally, what you two need to understand is, love is complicated. It doesn't fit neatly into a box. You can't just define it one way, and it stays that way forever. We came here, the three of us, because we were all friends. We had the skills, the rapport. Gabnid was chosen first, because of course, he was our leader. He wouldn't stand for anyone else to head up this mission, needed to know it was handled with the utmost care. And for his help he chose us, because we had all worked with each other, grew up with each other. We knew each other so well. Too well, perhaps. And not well enough.
She looked over at Medea at the clothes she was wearing. Personal gifts, found in some destroyed place. The regret was so plain on her face.
I didn't see it first. I was such a fool. I loved two men, but Gabnid didn't see it that way. It was all a tangled mess. So when he started on his project, Dahlgren, we didn't see it for what it was. He told us it would accelerate the colonization efforts by dozens, hundreds of years. And we were already so tired. I was never meant to rule. Never meant to be revered like some kind of god. We were supposed to all live together in equality and harmony. We'd come so far in just 20 years, but there was so much left to do. There were so many systems and projects and technologies, so much for us to keep track of and oversee. Dahlgren was supposed to take over all of that. We could finally begin proper integration. Bring our people to their new homes. Join our societies as one.
Cormu coughed and added,
Turns out we didn't completely think through the idea that one person would then be in total control of the whole planet. We didn't notice him changing.
Sophie continued.
Didn't understand what was changing. He made me the crown, which was sweet, and then the dress. I wouldn't let myself see it. Not until the ring. And then it was all too much. And I said no. It all fell apart after that. He started to avoid me, doing things we had no idea about. He became a different person. Some days he would be sweet. He would light up a room how he used to, with his smile, his intelligence, and curiosity. Other days he would be mournful, reclusive, and still others spiteful and cruel. We didn't know what to do. He wouldn't see us, talk to us.
Her face was crumbling.
Cormu, when we found out what Gabnid was planning, he knew how hard it would have been for me to try to face Gabnid after. Well, everything. He wanted to save me from that pain, so he went to talk to him alone.
Tears began to fall.
And he was hurt, all because of me, and...
She couldn't continue speaking, only turned into a blubbering mess. Cormu struggled to move his hand, took Sophie's in his, looked at her with a level of love and understanding that seemed beyond anything Medea had ever imagined. It made her feel like her love for Chesney was a silly, childish thing.
Shh. It's okay. It's okay.
She shook her head in despair and denial.
Where is Gabnid now?
Medea asked. She felt awful for needing to press the fragile woman for information. Sophie took the time to wipe her eyes and gain her composure once more. She held on to Cormu's hand, tight.
In the new capital, Grand Cirque, we decided to change the seat of power from the landing site. It was too inconvenient to work there. I imagine he's still finishing up or calibrating Dahlgren.
Her face crumbled again, looking at her love.
I'm such a coward, Cormu. How can you love me? Gabnid even gave it to me. Told me how, and I still can't. Even knowing what happens, I still can't.
She covered her mouth and shook silently. Cormu looked over at them.
Tell me, how is my sword broken? That should be almost impossible. There is an evil man in our time who built his own version of Dahlgren. Neugren. He used it to create another terrible monster. We used your things to destroy it and Neugren, but they were destroyed in the process.
Cormu nodded and continued on in a raspy voice.
That makes sense. How incredible that a Lanusian was able to follow in Gabnid's footsteps. I have to ask, what makes it so that they can only be harmed by your sword? What makes them invulnerable? Why is the sword so special? Science crap. I don't know. Something or other Gabnid discovered. Dahlgren is made from a special material he invented, so hard and durable it could only be harmed by more of itself. He made me the sword, the armor, the helmet out of it. Wanted to protect me from making an ass of myself, he said. That was from the good times, before he changed, before we all did.
Chesney stood up.
Please excuse us for a moment,
he said, and motioned for Medea and the others to follow him. They began to whisper.
I don't understand how this is possible. Cormu can't even get out of bed, let alone slay a dragon. Was it Gabnid that slew Strabo after all, and that's why Strabo cursed his name? But they seem very convinced that Gabnid is the cause of whatever is about to happen.
Medea bit her knuckle as she thought.
That's just it, though. All we have are legends. We have no idea what, actually, happened. Maybe they find a cure for Cormu after all. Maybe there was a malfunction in Dahlgren. Maybe Gabnid comes to his senses and something else we have no idea about happens. For all we know, Sophie saves the world. Whatever happens has already happened. We are just here to understand, and to find out what to do next. One of them must know how we can destroy that machine in our time. We need to make that our focus, Chesney. Are you serious? But if we can stop this from happening at all, imagine what? No,
she whispered harshly.
Think for a second. If we change anything here, what will happen to the future? It can't get any worse. Yes, it can. What if we get in the way of the world being saved? We go back to the future and find a dead world. Or we go back and everything is different, and we're complete strangers to everyone.
Chesney paled.
Oh, wow, I never thought of it like that.
He looked at his hands.
Us being here is really dangerous.
She nodded, emphatically.
Yes, very dangerous. We need to be very careful. We need to focus on what we came here to do, and try not to change things too much.
Chesney looked over to Lily and Mouth.
You two are awfully quiet.
They looked at each other.
This is why above my pay grade, boss,
Lily said, her face twisted in concern.
I didn't even think about this stuff. Like, what if I kick a rock somewhere, and my great-great-great whatever never meets up with my other great-great-great whatever, and I'm never born? I'm getting the heebie-jeebies just thinking about it. Whatever you two decide, I will support you to the extent of my strength,
Mouth said simply.
Okay. Okay. Let's get back there and focus on what we came for.
They returned to their seats and cold tea. When they did, Sophie had regained some of her composure and was looking at them all curiously.
Please, I have to ask. You seem so much like... If Linus has no Regans and we are nowhere to be found in, where did you two come from?
Medea winced.
We were hoping you would know. All we know is that 13 years ago, we arrived from the sky and crashed to Linus as babies. Others found us and raised us. We didn't even know we were Regans until very recently.
Sophie looked down and thought,
I don't understand this. There have been no Regan children born in millennia, even before all our people had been put to sleep. There are no active colonies on Rega that I know of, and no way for the remaining populace to awaken, even 10,000 years from now. You're both 13?
They looked at each other.
As far as we know, we came as babies. And the possibility of you being twins is so vanishingly small. I'm sorry, I wish I could help you. Everything I know tells me you two are simply impossible to exist. Where you came from, or how you came to Linus, I have no idea.
Both of them couldn't hide the hurt that came with finding out. Not even they knew where they had come from. Chesney cleared the thickness from his throat.
Let's get back to why we came. Do either of you know how we can destroy Dalgren in our time?
This time, it was Sophie and Cormu's turn to look at each other. A lot seemed to pass between them as the silence ticked on. At last, Sophie spoke.
I have an idea, but until I know what happens, I don't know what is safe to give you. What do you mean?
Chesney asked.
Let's say we give you Cormu's equipment for you to take back to the future. That will remove them from the past, and the future would change. You said you found his things on your journey. How could that have occurred if they were taken? Until I know what role they played in what happens, I have no idea what will happen if I send them back with you.
She shook her head in disbelief.
I cannot believe P.S. would send you back here. This is a very dangerous game he is playing.
Cormu spoke up.
Sophie, we can't just sit back and wait for it all to happen. What are you suggesting?
He looked over at Sophie.
We have to, Sophie. We can't let this happen. Ask them.
She looked at him almost incredulously. Her voice was tinged with horror.
Do you have any idea what the consequences could be? And even beyond that, you would send Regan children to do what we should do. Children, Cormu. Babies! Do you remember the last time a child was even born? Send me, send P.S., anyone. We should be handling this. There must be a way. We just haven't found it yet, apparently.
Medea watched something pass between Cormu and Chesney.
You know we lost the connection to the sea hemisphere. We're cut off, and even if we could, Gabnid would never listen to Piath. Let Gabnid see what his plans will come to. He might not be too far gone. Think of the lives we could save. And what if he is too far gone? Would you have the same thing that happened to you happen to these children? Gabnid doesn't have that anymore. I broke it, remember? He only had the one. Give them my sword, my armor, my helmet.
He seemed to stare into her, his eyes intense. Time seemed to stop. Sophie was frozen in shock. Her face was a mask of pain and horror and shame. Denial, until at last it fell to resignation.
Are we really doing this? We can't let this happen, Sophie.
He croaked, his eyes pleading.
Please. What other choice do we have?
She swallowed.
Gods. How can I even ask this of you?
She took the time to study them, their faces, her eyes tracing the contours of their scars.
You look like you've been through a lot. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
That anger that Medea had felt when she had heard the recording of Sophie confronting Gabnid melted away. She had been so upset knowing that Sophie had let it happen, judged her for what happened to the world. But being here, sitting in this room, seeing the aftermath of their relationship destroyed, her heart broke to see her like this, defeated, mourning. She had lost everything, blamed herself for not seeing the signs, blamed herself for not being strong enough to confront a friend, perhaps a lover, who had fallen into his own pit of despair. She looked over at Chesney and could tell he was also feeling humbled by the tragedy unfolding before them. Cormu had always been so strong in the legends. To see him like this, paralyzed, barely able to talk, there were no words.
I don't know what else to do,
Sophie continued.
Will you take these and try to convince him to stop building Dahlgren? Can you tell him of the future?
She walked over to a cabinet and opened it, revealing the pristine set of Cormu's armor, helmet, and sword.
And if he doesn't listen, please stop him now.
They both stared at the equipment, but really they were lost in the implications of her request. Was it truly okay to alter the past like this? What would it mean for their own existence? If they changed the future, would there even be a place for them anymore?
If we do this, what happens to us?
Midia asked, her voice thin.
I don't know. I know it's awful and selfish of us to ask this of you. I would try, but I know I would fail. I couldn't stop him before, and I know I couldn't do it now. You realize if we cannot convince him, we might have to fight him. Might have to kill him, right?
Chesney pressed. Sophie looked at him and forced her eyes to turn to steel.
Yes, I know. Then, excuse us again.
Once more they reconvened.
Okay, what do? We fight, duh,
Lily said, shrugging with an expression on her face that seemed to convey it was dumb to even ask.
How can you say that? Weren't you just worrying about never being born? Well, yeah, but we're talking an entire planet here. The math is pretty easy. I already don't have a home or anything to go back to. Best case scenario, if I show up to a brand new world that's suddenly full of life and opportunity. Worst case scenario, the world is dead. It was already almost there.
He turned to Mouth.
What about you? And I don't want to hear that you'll just accept whatever I say. I keep imagining what a world filled with life and technology and people would be like. Would Lubots be taboo there? Would it be accepted? Would people still die from starvation or disease? That future. I think it's worth fighting for.
At last Chesney's eyes fell upon her. All rationalizations went up in smoke in her mind as soon as his eyes met hers. There were so many real reasons why this was a terrible idea that could end up with terrible consequences. But why couldn't she stop thinking about the most foolish one? It was impossible to keep the worry out of her voice. She couldn't be cold about this, couldn't let go of her emotions and do the rational thing.
Chesney, What if we do this and then we never meet? Like, what if weird time stuff happens because of this, and all of what we did is just gone, and we never even met?
That gave him pause. There was a long time where he did not speak.
I'd be lying if I said I wasn't worried about that too. And you already know that I'd do anything for you. I mean it when I say, if I had to choose between you and the world, I'd pick you. But then I thought, maybe we don't need to go back. If we do this and somehow manage to stop it all from happening, and the future is changed, who says we need to go back? It's a brand new world then.
He took her hand.
The only world I need is one with you in it. I don't care where or when that is.
Her breath shuddered from the sudden release of that tension that had been building, that worry leaving her. How did he always know what to say to her? How did he always somehow find a way to make perfect sense and make her feel special at the same time? She hugged him.
You big, stupid idiot,
she said into his shoulder, hiding her big, stupid smile. Lily giggled from the sidelines.
Aw, now kiss. We can send her back to the future, though, right?
Midia grumbled.
You bet. Hey, don't even joke about that,
she whined.
I'll hold on to your legs and cry until you feel bad and let me stay.
Chesney nodded, putting an end to their fun and letting Midia go.
All right, let's try this.
He turned to Sophie.
All right, we will try. What can we do? Come here. Let me help you into the armor. I'll explain.
He took off Cormu's spare set and let Sophie start fitting the armor to him. Midia noticed that despite her initial impressions at Cormu's equipment, in their time looking amazingly pristine, they looked like shabby knockoffs in comparison to the originals. The armor was gleaming, and there was this aura of power coming off of it. She understood how the ancient people of Lennis had taken one look at him and declared them God. The helmet, too. Even she could tell that these could withstand incredible blows. If they had had these pristine versions of Cormu's things when they fought Lokiarn, they would never have shattered. Sophie began to speak as she got Chesney equipped.
When you're ready, I'm going to send you all to Grand Cirque, where Gabnid is putting the finishing touches on Dahlgren. While Dahlgren can't be harmed without Cormu's things, I doubt Gabnid has thought to armor himself in the same material. Be careful, however. He will not be some pushover. He may never have had Cormu's strength or courage, but he always made up for it with his cleverness and knowledge. I have no doubt he has defenses even I have not seen. Don't let your guard down.
At that, she pressed the helmet down onto Chesney's head.
It's so strange. You look so much like Cormu did when he was a boy, and yet... Not exactly. You're thinner. The eyes aren't quite right. The hair, too.
Her eyes drifted over to Midia, who felt it like the heat of the sun.
I truly don't understand. Do you? Do you think we are perhaps your children?
Midia asked, twisting the hem of her dress. This was very dangerous territory, but her fears were assuaged immediately.
No,
she said, sounding truly convinced.
I already considered that, and I can't see how. Two children looking almost exactly as their parents, this close, and born as twins, and that I somehow allowed you both to be abandoned? No, never. Nothing in all the universe could make me do such a thing. Plus, I just have a feeling, for all of how closely you seem to resemble us, you two are unique.
At last she took out the sword. The blade was brilliant white, edges like white smoked glass, shining, indistinct, powerful. Midia had no doubt that if Chesney dropped it, it would slice through the floor like it was made of pudding. When Chesney took it into his hand, it was with awe and reverence, and a tiny bit of fear. Quickly, he sheathed it.
I swear I'll use it well, but I hope it doesn't come to that. Me too,
Sophie said with the tiniest sliver of hope.
Huh,
Cormu said with that impossible-to-dislike grin on his face, despite the strain he was under.
You look even better in that than I do, kid. Go smack him upside the head for me and knock some sense into him. He's a stubborn idiot, but he really is a good person under it all. Okay, stand together,
Sophie called, and she closed her eyes and put up her hands.
I will send you there now. Are you all prepared?
They all stood together inside the glowing circle that was forming on the ground.
Yes, we are. Then I wish you good luck. Save our home, please.
The light rose up once more in rings around them, then slammed down. They were gone.
Save my friend.
In a blink, their surroundings changed from the inside of a humble home to the outskirts of a dazzling metropolis. Each of them, astounded by what they saw, gasped and turned all about them. Grand Cirque was enormous, beyond enormous, the scale of it beyond anything any of them had ever seen. A great metal wall extended in both directions from where they stood, seemingly stretching from coastline to coastline, with an entrance in the middle so large you could fit a house through it. And the people were everywhere. Of those just walking into the city, there were dozens of them. It was like seeing Kanshudo again, but so much larger. And the city stretched on and on, north then west, following the lay of the continent. Then, Lily pointed to the sky. Something far above was moving in the skies, leaving behind a white trail, and another going in a different direction.
Hey, out of the way,
a gruff voice called. Turning, they found a gaunt man with a dark red carapace, sitting atop some metal contraption, hovering over the ground. Behind it was another floating platform piled high with perfectly cut cuboid stones.
You're in the dang blasted middle of the road, you bunch of jokers.
His Lanusian pronunciation was incredibly accented, his lazy way of speaking aside.
Sorry,
Midia said, and they stepped off to the side. Looking south along the road, there were more and more people and moving machines coming at their own pace.
What on Lennis is all this? This is the world like it used to be, after only 20 years with the Great Ones.
Chesney said.
Look at how big just this city is.
He dug out the map, looked around.
It's like all the space between the magic school and Ratzurk combined, and then some. We're at the edge of the city, and we're halfway to Resutor Island. There must be thousands and thousands of people living here.
What was the rest of Lennis like? What had Jerain looked like all this time ago? How advanced was Sasquatch? Their minds boggled at the sheer impossibility of what they were being shown. They ran into the city and found street after street of lavish homes, or incredibly tall homes that seemed to house many families. Vendors on the streets just handing out food.
Hey there, pretty young miss. Would you care to try some of the newest food from the Great Ones? I kind of forgot what they wanted me to call it, but it's basically like a super lunch. It's got everything a young lady like you needs, and tastes great.
It was a kindly-looking Laffery man with light green hair, wearing an apron, and standing by a crate filled with little boxes. In his hands were 2 open boxes, with steam coming out of them, and disposable eating utensils wrapped in some clear packaging. Once again, his Lanusian was very accented to their ears. She took it without thinking.
Oh, thank you. How much do I owe you?
She asked, patting her belt for her money pouch. He looked at her in confusion.
Oh, me? Oh. Haha, you kids are just pulling my leg.
He laughed.
Yeah, I guess it gets hard getting used to just having free food you didn't have to work for. Anyway, try it out and come back tomorrow if you want more. If you could fill out a survey on how it tastes, how you felt after eating it, that would be extremely helpful.
He handed out food to all 4 of them, then ran off to hand more food out to some other passers-by. Bewildered, they all stared at the food and found a quiet alley in which to sit and eat and watch.
Oh my, forgive me, Mom. I'm sorry, but this is better than my favorite stew you used to make.
Lily commented, mouth full, so it was a very garbled sentence. Midia poked at it. It was long noodles and green vegetables and other things she didn't have names for, in some kind of salsa. She scooped it up and put it in her mouth, and she almost burst into tears just from that. It was delicious. It was amazing, the best thing she'd eaten in months. Maybe ever. She wasn't sure, but now that she'd had a bite, she couldn't stop eating it. It was like her whole body had been starving, and finally had something to eat.
Is it bad that I want to have another one?
Chesney asked, looking longingly across the street to the stall. When they had finished eating, they went to return the containers to the stall owner, but he directed them to throw them in something he called a public trash can, which confused them for a while.
I feel like a total country bumpkin here,
Lily said at last.
And I grew up in Sasquatch with all the fancy gizmos Zagos was making. You're not the only one,
Midia added.
But we can't get distracted. We have a mission here. We need to get to the tower.
At that she pointed to the giant, glittering metallic crystalline structure looming over the entire city. Like a comet frozen in time, it seemed to float almost effortlessly on a single support. It was dazzling, reflecting the light of the sun like a prism. But still, she couldn't let her guard down. She knew what it felt like, turned on.
You're right. Playtime is over. I know all of this is crazy, but we need to focus. Come on,
Chesney said, leading them north up the paved streets. Wonder after wonder passed them by. Dozens, hundreds of people all leading lives they couldn't begin to imagine. Everything was clean and fresh and alive and happy. They looked on like starving paupers looking on through a restaurant window, tantalized at the lives they could have led if things had been very different. Still, the Tower of Gabnid loomed higher and higher as they got closer, and though she knew it was only her imagination, she felt cold every time she looked up and saw it there. Somewhere up there was the Great One, Gabnid, he who brought wisdom to Lennis, who taught the world magic, Who created all of this?
Medea. Look.
Chesney said, pointing to the side. It took her a moment to figure out what he meant, but she shouted in surprise once she did it. It was a spiritualist temple. This one to heart. One of the spirits gone from Lennis in their time.
No way. No way.
She was suddenly incredibly excited and couldn't keep her body language contained. But then there was a splash of cold water to her enthusiasm.
But wait. Do you think we have the time?
He seemed equally apprehensive. But then he nodded and said,
We have to try. We'll never get another chance.
They practically raced to the doors. Inside was much like all the other temples they'd visited. Austere, yet timelessly beautiful. On 6 ornate tapestries sat 6 spiritualist masters, all of whom looked almost exactly alike and just as they had looked in the far-flung future. There was something a little disquieting about that fact, but those questions could wait.
Excuse us, masters, but we need to speak to the spiritualist master for heart,
Medea asked. She and Chesney had taken off their packs and bulkier armor and boots already, and were standing patiently before them all. Mouth and Lily chose to lean against the wall by the door, watching.
Ah yes, that's me, young ones. So good to see the youth of today truly taking an interest. Come, come, sit with me. Let us talk.
One said, beckoning to them kindly.
Now tell me, do either of you have spirits already? And what may I call you? Yes,
Chesney began.
I was born with fire, and have acquired all except earth and heart. My name is Chesney. I was born with earth and light,
Medea added,
and have acquired all spirits other than fire and heart. I am Medea.
This seemed to astound their prospective teacher.
Truly? How can one so young as you have come to have so many spirits already? Let me feel what I can.
He raised his hand towards them and concentrated.
Goodness. You have not only acquired them but mastered them all completely. This is unheard of. Why have you done this? How has this come to be? It's a long story that I cannot fully share.
Medea began.
But we are on a very important journey, for the good of everyone, and we need all the power we can get.
The old man considered.
And yet the path to power is one fraught with peril and temptation. I know, sir.
Chesney agreed, shifting on his knees.
We will not stray, I swear it.
The ancient teacher seemed to consider this for a time.
Very well. I will choose to have faith in you, but I should let you know that this will be the final stage of your journey. It is impossible for one person to obtain all 8 spirits.
That was new information.
Impossible. Why?
She asked.
I will be honest. I do not know. All I know is that whenever someone attempts to learn the final spirit, it will never enter their mind. I have another question.
Chesney began.
I have often felt like more than 2 spirits would wish to combine themselves, but it never works. Why is that?
The master nodded and chuckled softly.
Yes. You are correct and very insightful to have noticed. The relationship and interplay between 2 people working together can be simple, meaningful, but powerful. But as anyone who has tried to sustain a relationship with more than a single partner soon discovers, such a thing is volatile and fragile. So too with the spirits. Everything around us is made and controlled by the interplay with the spirits working together in harmony. But that is because there is balance. As there cannot be true balance within us, anything more than one-on-one interaction is completely impossible. Now, are you ready to begin?
They both nodded and closed their eyes. They were used to the process by now. Used to the heady incense, the feeling of thickness and pressure to the air.
Good. Now listen. Breathe deep. Relax. Heart is the spirit of the soul, the deepest core of all living things. It is the most personal feeling of all the spirits, and just like a true heart, dangerous if mishandled.
There was the tinkling of bells, and it seemed the other masters joined in as well, as a deep, sonorous hum filled the air. Medea concentrated on herself, her soul, and that feeling of concert within her where all the spirits dwelt. Light and earth felt especially potent to her probing thought. There was a pressure building in her mind.
Like all beings, heart desires gentleness and peace, the soothing of the soul. But with others, there is a passion that is given great power from emotion. Chesney, hold fire in your thoughts. Form the bond, feel what they desire together. Media, take earth and feel what they offer. Take hold of it, feel it, understand the depths of it.
She concentrated. Earth was the most healing of the spirits, the most protective. Immediately she could feel that with heart that tendency was magnified, expanded. There was something there, something born of love, born of altruism, born of sacrifice. Self-defeat. The implication of it was like a painful spark that made her shudder, but she did not turn away from it. What was self-defeat but the ultimate manifestation of altruistic love? To give one's own life force to another. To protect another as you would protect yourself. The kind of love that never asks for anything in return. She understood this magic better now that she could feel it within her. It would not kill her to use it. But nearly so. Very close. There were no half measures with it. It was all or nothing. Holding it within her, she had a new sense, a feeling of the beating hearts of all those around her. There was the thought of filling them with her own light, reaching out and connecting them with her. Her mind immediately focused on Chesney's, could feel his pulse quickening even as hers slowed. There was tension there, resistance. He was fighting the connection.
Chesney,
she breathed.
It is okay. Whatever it is, you are stronger.
She did not take his hand this time. Knew that it could scare him, like it had before, but her voice was safe. Her voice was calm. She could reach him with it. He took a deep breath in and out.
You're right. I know I am mad.
She opened her eyes and watched him, felt the flickering heat come off his body in waves. It was a hungry feeling, like it wanted to eat her, but she was not scared. Soon the feeling died down. He breathed out a long, slow breath and said,
I have it. Excellent, most excellent.
The master before them exclaimed,
Truly you both are masters among masters. You both commune with your spirits as easily as you breathe. There is nothing more I nor anyone else can teach you. May you bring peace to the world, true masters.
Like waking from a dream, they both languidly stood and bowed. To their surprise, all the masters in the room bowed low to them. It was a little awkward, but also a humbling experience. They thanked them, paid the fee, and departed with their friends.
Well, welcome to the club, Chesney,
Lily said, half smiling, though it didn't reach her eyes.
I hope your first time using it isn't as awful as my first time.
Media connected the dots.
Ah, so with fire and heart together it steals life, I take it.
He nodded.
Yeah. It felt like the ultimate selfishness. Why should they all have what I can take? It wanted to eat and drink until full to overbursting. What is yours?
She noted the utter opposition of their experiences.
Self-defeat. To wholly give over oneself to save another.
He looked at her.
It's funny, isn't it? How at odds our spells are at times. Do you ever wonder if there was a greater reason we were born with the spirits we had? It almost feels intentional.
She shrugged.
Who can say? Perhaps Piaz will have answers for us.
They discussed the other shared spells they now had together. Peace. The terrifying power of defeat all. Break all. Crush. An extremely powerful implosion-based attack. Attack back, the field that would reflect attacks back upon the user. And at last something strangely familiar.
Chesney. Heart and water. Is this what I think it is?
He felt for a moment, then nodded.
Yes. This feeling, it's the same as I was using that machine, to find Lily and bring her here. I wonder what we would call it. Higher. I know that one,
Lily said.
Friend of mine had it. It was handy sometimes.
Media could feel her mind reaching out to the minds of everyone she had a close connection with it. And coming up empty. It was a hollow feeling. Everyone she knew had never been born yet.
Okay. Well, I think we've put it off for as long as we can. Let's go and find Gabnid.
Now there was nothing left to distract her from the knowledge she was about to meet one of the most well-known, revered people in her time. Everyone knew who the Great Ones were, at least a little, but Gabnid was the hero. Gabnid, their leader. He gave them magic. He gave them knowledge. And together they united the scattered people of the world and turned them into a true civilization. Only now she knew. The story was much, much more complicated than that. They had their own reasons for coming here. And they were real people with their own problems. But it didn't change the fact that the lives of the people of Linus were forever changed for the better by their involvement. Or at least it was supposed to have. She looked up and saw the tower. Looked at all the people around her, walking by, smiling, unaware of the danger they were in.
What do you think he told everyone about the tower?
She wondered aloud, not really thinking.
You're right. That's a good question.
Chetsney said.
He must have told them something. Maybe. Hey! Hey, you!
He waved to a passing sane old man walking by with packages wrapped in paper. He raised an eyebrow and walked over.
Yes, did you need something, young man? Hey, sorry if I sound like an idiot. I'm not from around here. What's that big tower thing for? Well, you do sound like an idiot. What is that accent even from? But to answer your question, that is the tower Great Gabnid is building to house Dahlgren. He said that most of Linus can be brought under control with a minimum of devastation.
Minimum of devastation. It was like a punch to her gut.
Devastation? What do you mean by that exactly?
The Sainal shrugged, though he did look a little uneasy.
I won't lie and say I like the idea. But apparently there's still so many wild areas, plus a few places not willing to fully follow the wisdom of the immortals. Somehow, Dahlgren is supposed to be the answer. A final push to fully civilize the world, and a little display of power. And then we can all move on and unite as one for the future. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to get home. And if you're going to stay here, work on those accents of yours. You sound like Hicks.
They watched him trot away.
So, his rudeness aside,
she began.
It sounds like they were planning on clearing away more wildlife or something. Maybe they needed space to build places for the Reagans to go.
Lily offered. Could this all have been a mistake this whole time? That devastation that ravaged the surface, could it have been an accident? A colonization effort that went out of control?
What if we've been wrong this whole time?
She wondered aloud.
Maybe Gabnid never meant for any of this? Maybe,
Chesney said, resting his chin in his hand in thought.
But that whole display of power thing gives me pause. And Sophie and Cormu seemed very convinced that his motives were not altruistic in nature when he decided to start building it. Come on, we need to talk to him before it's too late.
They hurried the rest of the way, until all too quickly they were at the base of the tower. It was so strange to see the place in the past and the future. Unsettling. A little disorienting, too. It looked almost identical now as it did then. The area around it was like a construction site that had been mostly cleaned and emptied. Large, dusty, empty lots surrounding the resplendently decorated structure. So hard to believe that it was the cause of so much suffering. It shouldn't look beautiful. Chesney opened the door, and she could tell it was a difficult revelation for him.
Too familiar?
She asked. He just nodded.
Come on. It's not a long walk.
He led them past glowing walls of circuitry, up several flights of stairs to an elevator. Along the way, they found another emergency container. Chesney stared at it a while.
When I opened it in the future, there was a survival knife in IT. I wonder if...
His hand hovered over the button to open it. Then he shook his head.
No. Come on.
They piled into the elevator, and it began to rise. Then, odd, low-key, pointless music seemed to come from nowhere.
Forgot about that. Why would they have music play when you ride an elevator?
Lily wondered.
Maybe to have something to focus on.
Mouth wondered aloud, stroking his beard.
If people didn't know each other well, being forced together in a cramped space might feel a little awkward if it was too quiet.
Well, it did nothing for her nervousness. Every moment they spent in the elevator was getting them closer to turning a historical, untouchable figure into something real and tragic. The anxiety of knowing that they had to somehow convince a man who could create all of this to stop. What in the world could they even say, even if he did believe their story? She looked over at Chesney, and his eyes were almost hollow. He was breathing in controlled breaths like he was trying to keep calm, but it wasn't working. Without thinking, she reached for his hand.
All we can do is try.
As she said it, she almost believed it.
Yeah, huh? You're right. You're right. All we can do is try.
He nodded along to himself, trying to believe it too. Even the ever-jubilant Lily was showing the strain.
Okay, girl, you can do this,
she whispered, rolling back and forth on her heels. Mouth was quiet and thoughtful. He seemed more determined than anyone. Medea dearly wished she had his composure. Then it slowed and stopped. The doors swished open, and she lost her breath. The walkways were simple and flat, with no rails but the rest. All around them was eerie darkness and shadow. The walls of the huge, cavernous space were only noticeable from the tiny little reflections from the sparse, glowing circuitry. Strange metal struts and supports and pipes snaked everywhere around them. Above and below was such an enormous empty space that she felt like she could have fit a whole mountain in it, almost. Almost. Was this how it had looked to Chesney when he came up here the first time? The silence was so disquieting. But at least it wasn't on yet. They still had time. She took courage from that. And there, just a little ways in the distance over a few walkways, was a raised-up portion, with a large man standing there by a pedestal, his back to them. Gabnid. It was incredible to see him in real life. She could see now, the statues had not caught his true nature. He was large, as she'd known, but it suited him more than she thought it would. He had a grandfatherly air to him. From the back he had a mostly bald head, with 2 wisps of pale purple hair to the side, and she could even see the tips of his prodigiously long eyebrows. He was hunched over the pedestal in front of him, using some unseen tool to cause sparks of light, while mumbling to himself. Most astounding, though, was that he was seated in some kind of harness. It was red, and held him about the waist, and it had 8 legs that moved seemingly at his whim, effortlessly gliding him this way or that, to get into whatever position he needed to be in. They all shared a wordless glance, then started walking slowly forward.
Who's there? Sophie, is that you?
Gabnid said, taking a quick glance backwards.
Sorry, just a second.
His voice was so close to what she had imagined that it almost hurt to hear it, that grandfatherly tone. But there was a hitch there, something in the voice that was incongruous with the casual way he had said it. Before either of them took up the courage to speak, he kept talking as he worked.
Trust me, Sophie. It's all going to work out, just as I said. And don't worry about Cormu, that was just a mistake, an accident. I swear I'll fix him up just as soon as I can. You know I would never.
At that he turned and saw them properly. His eyes seemed to light up when he saw her, his mouth turned up just the tiniest smile.
Oh, you decided to wear it after all?
Then he looked at Chesney and his face turned a little more neutral.
Oh, I see. You're up. So you're both here.
He turned back to his work.
So, have you both finally understood and come to see the plan for the genius that it is? Or are you both going to try to dissuade me again?
He sounded less happy. Sudden realization dawned that he thought they were his friends. She was wearing the dress, the crown, everything but his ring, and Chesney was in all of Cormu's gear. But even so, they were clearly not their adult counterparts. How had he not noticed? Oh gods, how do we tell him? This was a dangerous place to be in. One wrong move from them could mean disaster if his feelings were hurt. Once again, the pair of them looked to each other for a sign of what to do, what to say. Medea mouthed, "Let me start," and he nodded. She stepped forwards.
Actually, sir, we are not Sophie and Cormu. We came here to talk. Eh?
The older man said, sounding confused. What in the world are you? He began to say, but he turned and looked at them more closely.
Oh, no, you're not.
His face turned, his expression changing so rapidly from emotion to emotion it was hard to track.
Where are they?
Chesney stepped forwards.
If I may, sir, Cormu is still bedridden, and Sophie sent us to speak with you.
His face looked a bit confused.
Oh, so I did do that. I see.
Then his expression turned bitter.
But she couldn't even come speak to me herself.
Medea stole a quick glance at Chesney, motioning for him to be careful. This felt wrong. Like he didn't completely remember what he had done. It suddenly felt like she was looking at a man that could explode at any moment.
She wanted to. She did. But she was scared. They're both worried about you. So we volunteered to come talk. Scared? Why should she be scared? She knows I'd never hurt her, never. You go tell her that. She knows I would never.
Did he forget that he'd slapped her?
Wait. Who are you anyway?
He said, getting a suspicious look. Seemingly, from just willing it, his 8-legged harness turned him and moved him closer.
You're not Laffrey. Wait. You're Regan's. That is not possible.
His face was something between astounded and horrified.
There's no way. No way. You could be here. Did they go back to Rega and awaken more people? But wait. You're one. Children. Real, actual, living Regan children. There hasn't been a child born for thousands of years. Sir, wait, we can explain.
Chesney said, his hands coming up defensively.
We were from the future.
She added.
Where we come from, something terrible happened 10,000 years before. That time is right now. Please, just listen to us.
He didn't seem to hear her. He just looked off into space.
She sent children against me, gave them my gifts, my weapons, sent them to kill me. Children.
His voice sounded so hollow, so far away.
No, not to kill you, Gabnid. They're worried about you.
Chesney yelled.
Not here to kill me.
Gabnid snapped.
Then what are those for?
He pointed to the swords at their hips. They were losing control of this situation.
No, please, just listen. My name is Medea. This is Chesney. We come from a future where the whole planet was almost completely destroyed. And then, 10,000 years later, Dahlgren was activated again, and unless we can stop it, it will finish the world off. But, if you never complete it to begin with, none of that will ever happen.
But he wasn't listening, just shaking his head, and his expression turned bruised, then mournful, and at last angry.
They still don't understand. They united against me, sent children against me, but they've forgotten the mission. Why we are here. Our people need a home, or they'll all waste away and die. This moon was always ours to do with as we wanted. Sharing it with lesser beings. Why? Sentiment? What use is sentiment when your people have not seen the sky in millennia? Gabnid, please, you don't need to do this. Look outside.
Chesney begged.
You have a whole world of people that your inventions and guidance has turned into practically a paradise. Just step away from the machine. Let's just talk. Let's go see Sophie and Cormu and talk.
Gabnid looked at them both, turned and looked at the pedestal, at the hand-shaped recess. He spoke softly.
What use is a utopia when you can't have the one thing you ever wanted?
His voice became louder, angrier.
Why did I listen to them? We could have been done by now if we'd just taken over from the beginning. Instead, they left me with all the work, and all the while Cormu was stealing her away from me. They treated me like a fool, and I let that sentimentality I had for her cloud my better judgment. Well, no more.
He slammed down his hand into the receptacle, and all at once a terrible noise and sparking lightning began to erupt all around him.
No.
Chesney screamed.
I'll do what I should have done from the start. I'll cleanse this world of all these lesser beings. I'll make a new world, a better world. And when we finally have our new home, they'll finally see I was right.
A voice came out from the pedestal.
Gigana kolhro iagnet, odo. Thatha gen tu, tintin a kor. Zigidi agnet namoy ulrega. Gigana dalgren nata petri. Stiln seden. Flamingo daisy, strabo.
The pedestal began to spark and screech. A deep hum or howl began to quickly build in the air, and the entire tower seemed to tremble and shake beneath their feet. What was once nothing but darkness and tiny twinkling lights erupted into action and chaos. Sparks flew everywhere, and groaning metal moving for the first time filled the air. 2 great golden wedges above the pedestal lit up with lightning, and great arcs of electricity passed between them and other things far away from the platform. Then some kind of ray or light or distortion formed between the 2 wedges and enveloped Gabnid. What was once a dead dark hall filled with dimly lit walkways was now transformed into a bright churning mass of machines and unknown devices.
No, no, no. Not again.
Chesney screamed like mad as he looked on in horror at the all-too-familiar sequence of events unfolding for the second time in his life. A presence filled the air, dark, full of malice and hatred. That familiar pressure was building now from all around them.
Do you know what Dahlgren does?
Gabnid crowed from within the light.
It takes all that makes you, and strips away useless sentimentality, and replaces it with power. Soon a new perfect being will be born, my Strabo, and together we shall cleanse Linus.
In the air beyond the platform, a swirling form was taking shape. Eyes, teeth, arms, tongues, bones, wings, claws. A boiling mass of things bubbled into existence, grew, smashed into each other, and merged, only to break apart into something else. A formless body of infinite form and flesh, incapable of description, expanded more and ever more. It grew to the size of a man, and soon a house. And then it grew further and larger, until she feared it would soon break apart the entire tower with its incredible size. But it wouldn't stop. Certain features began to form and persist. A creature was being born with a familiar body. A dragon. A massive orange-red head covered in diamond-hard scales, crowned with spikes longer than she was tall. Glittering wings along a coiled serpent-like body. Thick armored flesh. 2 sets of keen, malicious yellow-slitted eyes floating in blood-red sclera. Hundreds of fangs pushing out of the flesh from within the cavernous mouth. A great roar was building, a voice as great as the sea and the sky, shaking them to their core. Abruptly the horrid growth ceased. Despite the terrible din of the machines in the tower, a disquieting stillness filled the air. The creature floated beside the platform, towering over the stunned party. Faced with the utterly alien, incomprehensible evil before them, they could only stare at the terrible thing, for what seemed like a lifetime. They had failed. The world was about to be destroyed, again, and this time, Cormu wasn't there to save it. Gabnid's harness leaped him into the void, landing on the back of Strabo's neck. He looked like a tiny speck in comparison to the massive monster. Is this how Strabo was? That gentle creature was like this? When she had first seen him, heard him, he seemed perhaps a little mad, but gentle. He had raised them up and let them see Linus in a whole new light. Her time with him had been brief, but he had been amazing. Looking into Strabo's eyes now filled her with emotions she barely had names for. Despair and terror and horror and disgust, all rolled up into a single sickening feeling at looking upon the doom of the world and feeling powerless to stop it.
Come, Strabo, fly us to our righteous work.
Gabnid shouted to the heavens. The tower around them sparked to life and somehow became transparent and insubstantial. Suddenly they could see all of Grantzurk and far out into the rest of Nasquat, and Strabo's wings began to beat. The pressure was incredible, like being swatted down to their knees by the force of a typhoon.
We have to stop them.
Chesney shouted.
Everyone hold on to me.
They all rushed to him and grabbed on. He yelled out a battle cry and jumped, and a great gust of wind exploded from behind him, and sent them flying up to Strabo and Gabnide as they were making their escape. All of them screamed in terror for their lives as they flew through the open air at the mountainous dragon. In a jumbled heap they landed, scattering in every direction, and they each scrambled to find a scale or protrusion to hold on to. Strabo's great wings bore them up and up and up, away from the tower, far above Grant Cirque into the stratosphere. They were down by the middle of Strabo's back, and they could just hear Gabnid's mat screaming from the neck over the wind.
Show them, Strabo. Show them I am the true master of Lenus. Cleanse these worthless fools from my world.
Strabo roared, and like the blow-up spell, but 1,000,000 times more powerful, the ground below them erupted in countless explosions. The light of the sun seemed to dim as the lights of the explosions below overshadowed it. Every building was being blown apart, smoke filled the air, fires were spreading.
Do you hear that, Sophie? If you have ears to hear, hear this. Those disgusting creatures you loved more than I, hear them scream. You'll regret rejecting my love.
Medea looked on in horror as she tried to regain her footing in the powerful wind, and again Strabo fired, and the already devastated city was completely obliterated with more enormous explosions.
Everyone!
Chesney growled. He was braced against the wind. Cormu's sword plunged into a thick portion of hide.
Get up! We need to hurry.
They all staggered to their feet, and as one turned and ran for the head, where Gabnid had perched himself, atop Strabo's crown of horns. Before they could get far, there was a sudden blast of wind as Strabo surged forwards, west. They were knocked down prone once more, all except Chesney, who seemed to refuse to fall. Another array of explosions, and the countryside was aflame. He ran to them, helped each of them up.
We can't let this happen. We can't let this happen,
he shouted, mad with rage. For once, Medea shared his bloodlust. No matter what, this was beyond forgiveness. Beyond anything she could endure. She would not, could not, let this stand.
I'm with you. We'll do it together.
When she grasped his hand, she filled him with every supportive spell she could. He practically glowed with power.
Are you two insane?
Lily yelled, uncoiling her whip.
What the hell do we even do about something this big? I'll show you.
Chesney yelled, and he plunged his sword deep into Strabo's spine. The monster yelled, and for a sickening moment, they all seemed to drop from the sky. But then the wings caught again, and Strabo surged somewhere else in Nasquat, and then his legs clattering noisomely as they carried him along, Gabnid appeared before them.
That's enough of that. You think I won't hurt you because you're children. You couldn't be more wrong.
He raised up his hand, and she could see it was covered in some kind of red articulated armor, with a glowing light in the center of his palm. In the next moment there were flashes of light, and Chesney was repeatedly blown back by the blasts until he lost his footing and was blown far behind them.
Chesney!
Medea screamed, helpless to stop him from being blown out of sight. It was too much. Witnessing the world being burned to a crisp before her very eyes, not knowing if Chesney was hurt, or if he'd even been thrown off Strabo's back. She turned back and practically snarled at Gabnid, lightning flashing all over her body.
You monster! They trusted you. They worshipped you. They loved you. This is unforgivable, Gabnid.
She blasted him with the greatest bolt she could muster, not letting its power wane even the slightest bit despite the great drain on her own life. A field had formed around him, and the lightning crashed and crackled against it. Some bounced away harmlessly against Strabo's thick hide, but some did carve into Gabnid's harness, dripping molten gobs of metal away from them. When she felt that slight twinge of danger, the feeling of knowing she was going too far, only then did she finally relent and take a knee to recover. Still, gasping for air up in the thin cold atmosphere, she only had hatred left in her heart for this person. No matter how much his heart had been hurt, there wasn't enough pity in the entire universe that could excuse this madness. Lily jumped in front of her, shield up.
You're dead, asshole!
She yelled, then snapped her whip right at Gabnid's face. Incredibly, the legs of the harness carried him around her attack like she was standing still. Mouth was there to yank her out of the way before she was crushed underneath.
"Slippery bastard,"
she mumbled.
"None of you know who you're dealing with. Allow me to show you how powerless you really are."
Both Gabnid's hands came together, and a field of energy surrounded a small but expanding sphere of light. First red, then orange and yellow, and soon a blinding whitening. Then he thrust it away from him, and everything in front of him was blown back in a fiery series of explosions. Medea was hit the worst by it, creating a smoking arc through the air as she was blown towards Strabo's tail. Lily and Mouth were both hit as well, and were blasted off to the sides, though they managed to catch themselves on the parts that normally would have shielded Strabo's wings when they were folded.
"You're nothing special. I can do that too, buddy. Dodge this,"
Lily shouted back through gritted teeth, and she snapped her fingers. The air filled with a sea of scattered random explosions. While a few bounced off his field protecting him, just as many seemed to erupt from within it, making the effect worse. He growled.
"How dare you disrespect me like that, you insect? You only exist because of me."
Mouth stood quickly and drew up his great sword.
"Respect? You're nothing but a murderer, Gabnid."
With a great swing, he brought it down against the portly man, and the two front legs came up and tried to block. One took the brunt of it and was turned into a smoking, sparking mess, but the other was able to kick him away with a vicious strike to his gut. When Medea was finally able to stand once again, she engaged her shield and recovered her strength enough to keep fighting. So enraged that she couldn't think straight, she ripped Sophie's sword from its sheath and started running back to the battle. She no longer wanted to blast him with her power from a distance. She wanted to see him bleed from up close. This man who had destroyed the world not once, but now twice, who had perhaps killed her love. She would make him pay for it all. Strabo was relentless. More explosions rained down upon Lennis, and the skies were quickly filling with black clouds of smoke, and so was light only able to light the sky, a poisoned red. She barely noticed that they were approaching the central sea dividing the Nasquat and Sasquat continents. She couldn't think about how Nasquat must already be fully devastated. If she did, she would panic and lose this rage. No, she would not let that happen. Not let that monster have any advantage. She only had eyes for the traitor. She would end him for this. Just as she got within range of the battle, Gabnid used his hand once again, this time blasting each of them several times. Lily was knocked off her perch and slid further down Strabo's side. Mouth was blown off his balance and fell back. And Medea was hit square in the chest, but the field protecting Sophie's dress, much like Cormu's, had deflected it enough that she only stumbled a bit and didn't lose her momentum. Using all her strength, she leaped over his final shots and plunged her sword down at him without care. He dodged, but not fast enough, and her blade plunged into his chest, but not very deep. It did give him the opportunity to grab her by the throat.
"I can't believe I was fooled by you for even a moment."
Gabnid sneered as he towered above Medea.
"I won't make that mistake ever again."
She could hear something in his arm charging up, felt heat building against her throat, pressed there by his powerful grip. A cold wave of fear washed over her. If this hit her, there was no way she could survive it. Panicking, she pulled at his grip and kicked for his body, but his reach exceeded her own. As a last-ditch effort, she used her foot to push out a strong break spell at his head. The wave of distortion hit him point-blank, slamming into his face with a disgusting crack. His head was knocked back with a spray of blood, and she was finally dropped to the ground.
You little bitch,"
he coughed and croaked.
"You're nothing like her, and you never will be." "You're right about that."
She wheezed while standing back up.
"I'm better."
At that, he used the harness to kick her in the gut and shove her away while he backed up. A field once again formed between his hands.
"I don't have time for you wretches."
Lily, Mouth, and Medea scrambled to find something to hold on to, but that wouldn't be necessary. A sword burst out of Gabnid's chest, and the attack forming between his hands faltered and sputtered out.
"Then make time,"
Chesney hissed, jerking the sword deeper still before pulling it out. Chesney and Medea couldn't hide the relief on their faces at seeing the other still alive and fighting. But this wasn't the time for reunions.
Don't let up. Everyone, give it everything you've got right now,
Medea ordered. They surrounded him. Strabo unleashed another torrent of explosions below them, and the SS Quat continent was officially under fire. The pressure from the explosions was enough to distract them, and Gabnid regained his stance and backed up enough so they were in front of him again.
You can't even see it's too late.
Gabnid coughed, blood spurting from his mouth.
I've won. Just give it up already.
But they had no words left for the legendary man before them. Gabnid blasted shot after shot at the pair of them, but now that they were together, they moved like a single being. Dodging out of the way of most bolts or slapping them away with their shields, nothing stopped their advance. At the last moment, they leaped to either side and blasted Gabnid with break and lightning, just in time to mask Lily and Mouth's approach. Mouth came in low, spinning with his great sword and carving into Gabnid's mechanical legs. Lily jumped over him and landed on Gabnid's back. She started using the vampiric spell as she held onto his neck from behind.
I've never hated anyone enough to use this before, but for you, I'll make an exception.
She then shouted to Chesney,
Don't let up. Don't worry about me, just take him out. Filthy pests. Just die.
Gabnid screamed, scrambling at his neck to try to get Lily off of him. His portliness didn't help his situation, but the harness carrying him was still undamaged enough to carry him across Strabo's back, with enough speed that he was able to dodge away from the rest of them while he fought. She refused to let go, even as he thrashed and blasted her with the energy from his palms.
Mouth, keep up a snowstorm. We need to overwhelm him.
Chesney barked, and Mouth immediately got to work. The air filled with a new blasting wind, this one swirling with razor-sharp bits of ice, this one pushing Gabnid back, step by step, chipping away at the field protecting him, some parts getting past it, and cutting at Gabnid and Lily's skin. Then he glanced at her, and she could tell that this had to be their final push. There wasn't much world left to save. They both rushed forwards with insane speed, dashing in and out of Gabnid's range, slicing at his harness, slicing at his body, peppering him with blasts of lightning and fire. Gabnid was taking hits from everywhere, and his movements becoming even more frantic. Finally he screamed, and there was an enormous explosion centered on him, and all of them were thrown back into the air, scattered like bowling pins. Below them, another barrage of explosions devastated the planet, somehow even more powerful than before powerful wings surged somewhere else. This isn't working, she thought, her mind scrambling for anything that could end this fight right now. She had one thought, but it was a huge risk. Gabnid hadn't seemed all there even when he was calm, distracted and losing time. Maybe she could take advantage of that. As they both got to their feet, Medea said as quietly as the wind would allow,
I have a plan. You need to sneak up behind him and finish this. What about you? I'm going to distract him, but even if it doesn't work, you need to keep to the plan.
He looked at her, worry etched into his eyes, but after a heartbeat he nodded, and looked around for a good way to sneak away, then dashed off. She looked around to see that Mouth and Lily were struggling to get up. That last attack had been devastating. She was also feeling the pain. The power of the dress's protection field wasn't perfect. Much of the force still got through, but she could still walk. She sheathed her sword and started walking.
Gee, Gabnid, where are you?
She said, walking forward and sounding weak and confused.
What's going on?
Gabnid appeared from behind one of Strabo's great shoulders, staggering on sparking, barely functional mechanical legs.
Sophie?
He sounded lost. His eyes were unfocused and his hands were shaking. He was covered in blood and soot.
Oh, Gabnid, you're hurt. What happened to you?
She walked towards him, holding her hands together and to her chest, looking worried. Gabnid saw her and his expression softened, holding out his hands, but then looking shocked to see blood all over them.
I'm not sure, I think. I think there's been an awful accident.
He looked all around, seeming very confused.
Are you hurt? I am fine. But don't worry, it's all going to be okay. We can finally just go home. We'll go get Cormu and just go back to how things were, okay?
She had no idea what to say to keep distracting him, but she felt like this was the right path to start on. She only hoped his own delusions were enough to fill in the gaps.
Yes, that sounds lovely.
As she approached, she tried to reach up to him, but jumped back as the sparking mechanical legs seemed to stutter and jerk. He saw, and immediately hit a button, and the legs deactivated. The field around him disappeared.
Oh, Sophie, I don't know what happened. How did we get up here?
He seemed to look around, but Medea held his head, and forced him to look at her. There finally, seeing that lost expression of his face, she could see that he was well and truly gone. Her face crumbled just that little bit, and a tear welled at the corner of her eye. She struggled to speak.
Shh! Shiss! It's okay. It will all be over soon.
Then a sword burst through his chest, right through his heart. He looked down at it, almost disbelieving. But then tears fell down his cheeks.
I did all this, didn't I? Oh, Cormu, my friend. Sophie, my love. I'm so sorry.
His eyes turned to a spot on Strabo's neck, and he pointed to a specific spot.
There, Cormu. The sword.
He coughed and blood sprayed over Medea's face.
Save what she loved.
The sword was pulled from Gabnid's back, and he slumped forward. Still. Chesney and Medea's eyes met over his corpse, both covered in the blood of the most important man in the history of Lenus. That they had killed. She had no idea what to say, what to feel. Whatever it was, she felt it like loss.
Hurry,
she said, and gestured to the spot. He looked, saw that Strabo was preparing another attack, and realized they were out of time to mourn. She watched him stand where he had stood before, sword in hand, and watched time reverse itself as he plunged the sword back into where they had found it. And then, at last, she understood. Strabo roared, this time in pain, real pain, and this time he seemed to have a voice.
Gabnid, what is happening? I cannot move.
Strabo's wings stopped working, stopped flapping. His whole body began to flash and spark with arcs of electricity. They began to fall from the sky. Lily came forward, supported by Mouth.
Did we win?
She managed weakly. Medea looked out over the ocean. The sky was black and red. Fires were burning everywhere. Everywhere. There did not seem to be a place in all of Lenus that wasn't burning and...
No,
she said.
But we were never meant to.
Lily gave her a confused look, but Medea didn't elaborating. She walked to Chesney, who was covering his face and whispering to himself. He obviously heard her approach because he said,
How many times am I going to have to watch this happen?
Before she could answer, Strabo's body rocked again, and they all had to scramble for something to hold on to as the great dragon's descent became erratic. They had no choice but to hang on and hope, but she wasn't too worried. She had a very strong feeling she knew exactly where they were going to land. She looked out over the world, watching the great plumes of fire like pillars to the heaven, seeing the hundreds and hundreds of red lights boil underneath them. And then, all too soon, Strabo's wings carried them to the ground. In a catastrophic, earth-quaking slam, he plunged headfirst into the ground, tossing them all forwards over his body as he crumpled. She regained consciousness, with Mouth and Chesney helping her to her feet. Dizzily, she turned around to see that all of them were safe, and they stood quite near to Strabo's head. His eyes were not filled with hate but fear. Over and over he seemed to be struggling to rise, but barely being able to move at all.
My strength,
he roared, with his great voice now reduced to pitiful mewling weakness.
The sky! I can't reach the sky.
One last time he tried to rise and lifted his great head, but lost all his strength and collapsed down into the dirt, shaking the ground.
Why was I born? Just for this? I tasted the sky, and now I am trapped.
His two sets of eyes settled upon them, and they were filled with pleading.
Please, heroes, end my life. Do not condemn me to wasting away for year upon year, to feel his hate, his vindictiveness bleed out of me for centuries.
Chesney nodded and stepped forwards, but Medea put her hand forward and caught his shoulder.
No, you can't.
He gave her an incredulous look.
I know. I'm sorry. I'll explain later.
She stepped in front of Chesney and spoke.
I'm sorry, Strabo. We can't. I'm very, very sorry. You're great ones too, are you not?
She nodded.
Then, come and see me again, when I am free of this hate.
He stared at her. She felt like he was looking right through her.
I feel we will meet again. Perhaps then, I will feel the wind once more.
She bit her lip and wiped away a tear, and nodded.
Until then, goodbye, Strabo.
Then, she walked away. She knew where they were. Dragon Mountain. Knew that just over that hill would be Cormu's and Sophie's house. She had finally understood it all.
Medea, why are we leaving him there?
Chesney asked, catching up to her.
What if he breaks free?
She shook her head.
He won't. Not for 10,000 years. Not until you pull the sword out.
He stopped.
Wait.
She did, and watched him as he put together the same puzzle that she had. They hadn't been sent back in time to stop this from happening. It had already happened, and they had to play their parts.
But the legends said it was Cormu. Or someone who was wearing his armor.
Realization began to dawn upon him. Mouth seemed to be lost in thought. Lily looked confused, asked,
Okay, what am I missing here? 10,000 years ago, when the surface was devastated, it wasn't Cormu who stopped it. It was us. If we had never been sent back, the world we knew would never have existed. That's nuts. Something else would have saved it. Cormu, he would have, right? Or Sophie.
She shook her head.
Cormu is paralyzed. There's no way he could have stopped Gabnid. And Sophie never left his side. It was U.S. Liliette. It was always U.S.
Her face turned even more confused.
That's... What? But... How?
They started walking again. Chesney asked,
But if we don't go back and get the sword, what are we supposed to do in the future? I don't know, but I think Sophie does. Let's go ask.
They found their home right where they had left it, just west of where Dragon Mountain would be in the future, just north of Lagan. She wondered if it was still there in their future. She resolved to check when they returned. When they came into the home, she could see that it hadn't been easy on the two of them while they were gone. Sophie was at a window watching the devastation. Cormu looked pained and mournful. Both were surprised to see them come in.
What happened?
They both said at the same time. They sat down and explained how Gabnid had been confused and hurt, how he seemed too lost to speak to in the end and had grown enraged and activated the machine, and how they had been fighting him since then, trying to bring Strabo down before the whole world was destroyed, and her suspicions that this had all happened before and was meant to happen. Cormu was the first to speak after their story had ended.
Well, you two really are from the future, huh? And now you've come to look for a way to stop it in your time. But you have to realize why you can't take my things to the future, right? Why?
Chesney asked, though she understood already.
If you take the things now, then they would always have been gone. Your journey would be impossible. Then, what? What are we supposed to do?
He coughed, then looked them both in the eyes.
There's one other way. But it's not easy. In fact, it's goddamn dangerous. We don't have a choice, sir. Don't call me sir. I should be calling you that. Fighting Gabnid like that, as kids, that must have been near impossible. But you did it. But yeah, I get it. I'd say the same damn thing. Sophie? Come on. Tell them more.
Sophie retreated from her perch by the window.
Yes. There is one more way.
She took a large crystal sphere from behind her and placed it on a table. She looked at it, and only it, as she spoke.
At the end, before I lost him completely, Gabnid gave me this. Told me that if I had truly thought he was so far gone, that I should use this. What is it?
Medea asked, remembering the cut-off portion of the recording they had heard.
The truth is, the spirit system has an inherent limitation placed on it. Nobody, no matter what, can acquire all 8 spirits. With one exception. This device. Why is that forbidden?
Chesney asked.
Because the spirits had always been designed to work in conjunction. When they are all together, there is a power there so great that nobody could ever be trusted to wield it. Hearing that, the system was locked to prevent anyone from attaining that power. The field, the material that protects Dahlgren, it also relies on breaking the underlying structure of the universe. It shouldn't exist. Nothing natural can touch it. But with this power, one person can.
She took a deep breath and leaned forwards, looking at them both with a very intense stare.
I'm not exaggerating at all with this. This power given by the spirits is beyond anything you can imagine. It's so much more than just some magic. The temptation to use it is so great, it was sealed with an ordeal that one must undergo to earn it. And I only have one of these. This might be the only one that exists. You understand, yes? Only one of you can undertake this.
Medea and Chesney looked at each other.
You know it's you, Chesney.
He nodded.
I know.
He turned to Sophie.
What do I do?
She pressed something on the crystal sphere and backed away, scared.
Simply place your hand upon it. But, Chesney, I have to warn you. I don't know exactly what you'll face. All I know is that if you fail, you'll never escape it. You have to be sure.
Medea watched him with her own anxiety building up inside her. She knew that he would touch it, knew beyond a shadow of a doubt. But she also knew the doubt swirling inside him. And beyond all of those, she was afraid that something like this, something she couldn't protect him from, would take him from her. But she had to be strong. Had to believe. Had to give him all her confidence even when she was scared.
You can do it, Chesney. Don't you see? It was always us. It was always you. Chesney, you've done things even the great ones could not. If there was ever someone worthy of this, it's you. And beyond all that, I know you can do it. With everything I am, I believe in you.
He met her eyes, and she could see that seed of doubt in him. She took his face in her hands and pressed her lips to his. Whispered to him,
Come back to me.
They parted. He looked down at the crystal, his hand hovering over it. There was no shaking. The doubt seemed to leave him, and he touched it with his palm. There was a snap, and the crystal shattered into hundreds of little pieces. Chesney's body shook, and he gasped, staring wide-eyed and unfocused at nothing. She caught him as he fell backwards.
Chesney, what's wrong?
But there was no one there to respond.